This true story takes place on the North Island of New Zealand, and although I've never been there in person, every single thing I've heard and all the pictures I've seen tell of a magical place that's beautiful, surrounded by oceans with beaches of black or golden sand, hills and mountains, streams, lakes, rivers, glaciers, forests, green fields, and pastures. It has bubbling mud pools, and it has hot springs just waiting to take away aches and pains, and beautiful, beautiful skies, glorious sunrises and sunsets. Warwick Beedell is a bushman, hunter, guide, teacher, writer, dogman, dairyman, multi-farmer, bridge builder, and explosives man. He is a husband, father, and grandfather, and has lived his whole life as an active, concerned steward of the earth. He is also my very best friend. We're having an argument, Warwick and I, over the size placement of the Sambar deer, the subject of this story. From the research I've done, the North American moose is the largest, with the males averaging about 1,800 pounds, and the Sambar deer is second, having stags that are 600 pounds or so. Warwick tells me that the elk are larger than Sambar. I've included pictures of all three so you can decide for yourself, and I will compromise and call it a tie between the Sambar and the elk, because Warwick deserves a compromise, I think, in this case. And it'll make him feel good, because he is the expert, after all. Now, this is the story of Old Clubfoot, a tribute to a great game animal. And it is by my friend, Warwick Beedell. You might already have said to yourself, what a strange title for a story. I first met Clubfoot in the late 1960s while pussyfooting around Sandtoft Forest looking for a pheasant or two. The score was about 10-0 to the pheasants when all of a sudden Charlie, my golden lab, started to bark on the far side of a large patch of lupin. And lupin are huge, huge plants in New Zealand. Knowing that Charlie would only bark if he had a cat treed or a deer bailed, I put the boots in top gear and headed in the direction of the commotion. As I got closer, the thought crossed my mind that good old Charlie had bailed a rather large bulldozer and was swinging it around by the tail, intent on flattening the whole damn forest, such was the volume of the noise. When I got there, on went the brakes and then a couple of quick steps backwards. There before me, being harassed by a dog, was the biggest, meanest Sambar stag I had ever seen. Before I could unload the pair of fives and replace them with solid slugs, the big brute saw me and took off over the lupin in enormous bounds, giving the impression he was flying. He left dog behind as if he was only having a workup to tone out his reflexes. He left me there shocked by the amount of lupin he had flattened, having his little game. He also left me with a memory I will never forget. Firstly, the size of him, and secondly, the size of his antlers, which were very heavy and long. I also noted his antlers were almost white, as most of the pearling appeared to be worn off them. A massive beast with white trophy antlers. Seems like a dream now, but I, and others who encountered him, knew Clubfoot was very real. I gave chase, but was no match, as I could only leap and bound 5 to 6 feet, as opposed to the 15 to 18 feet bounds that monster was taking. It was while pacing out the length of the leaps that I noticed the unusual footprint. It was rather like a clover leaf. I was, in years to come, to draw a square around the footprint each time I came across it, and top put an A in the corners like the ace of clubs. Hence the name Clubfoot. Several weeks later, I was telling my story to an old chap who worked on one of the large coastal farms, and he told me he was familiar with the stag and had known of his presence for many years. He was also sure he was guilty of the animal being lame, as he had come across the stag one day hiding in a set of sheepyards in the back of the farm. All he had with him was a shotgun, so he cut a case and stalked as close as he could get, but the deer took off over the yards. The old fellow fired, but only wounded the big stag in the leg, so he thought. He tried to follow, but lost the trail. It was many months before he saw that stag again, and he was limping. Try as he could, he had never been able to get another shot at him, as Clubfoot just became more and more crafty as the years went by. As I left the old chap, he gave me a world of advice. He said that if I wanted to become a good Sambar deer hunter, I should spend as much time as I could spare tracking old Clubfoot, because that stag, he said, knew every trick in the book. In the years that followed, that stag taught me all I know about the mightiest deer in this country. He could lead a mob of hinds away from the hunter before the hunter knew they had ever been deer in the area. He didn't always use cover, as he could also disappear in the open, as if the ground had opened up and swallowed him. He was a grand master at when it came to being dogged. He would usually lead them to water where they were easy pickings. I know, because he killed 3 dogs that I know of, and probably others I didn't hear about. The owners would arrive at the edge of the lake, after a fair sort of a chase, to find his dog floating in the bloody water, and no deer in sight. Only the telltale footprints left to say Clubfoot had done it again. Even spotlighters found that he was a crafty sod. He had the habit of falling over just before they pulled the trigger, sometimes fooling the hunter into thinking he had actually shot him, only to find, when looking for the body, the marks in the sand where he had crawled on his knees down into the cover of lupin or young pines and got away again. Every now and then a hunter would claim to have put a bullet or 2 into old Clubfoot, but failed to find him. Some trailed him for miles, but lost him when the blood trail ran out, or old Clubfoot would do one of his disappearing acts, only to turn up months later as if nothing had happened. I remember one of these occasions very well. I was working in the garden one Sunday afternoon when a carload of forest workers turned up to see if I would take my dogs out to the forest to see if they could find a stag they had wounded. They told the tale of how they had chased a stag out from the Raupo on one side of the lake. It had taken to the water and swam to the other side. They reckoned they had put several .308 bullets into it, and it staggered out the other side and vanished. I took the dogs out because I hated to leave an animal to die in lingering pain. We found his tracks, but the dogs lost his scent. The next 2 days I searched, but could not find him. I was sad to think someone had shot old Clubfoot and had nothing to show for it. But I was wrong. While out looking for signs of the deer a month later, I came across that odd footprint once again. Looking for Clubfoot became an obsession of mine. I don't know if I would have shot him if I had the chance, but I had so much respect for him, and I just kept on chasing him. It was one of these trips that a mate of mine and I were slowly driving the roads, looking for the deer sign, that I saw that footprint for the last time. I had seen the faint tracks and had gone to investigate. I followed them through some long grass and into a clearing in the pines. In the soft sand it was clear to see they had been made by my old foe Clubfoot, so I called out to my mate for him to come and have a look. We were following the prints when a voice from in the pines said, "What do you think you're up to?" I turned to see a guy approaching with a rifle. After telling a lie about getting sidetracked while going to our favorite whitebait creek, I asked him if he had had any luck. He told us he had just shot a skinny, old, lame stag with very poor antlers. My throat went dry, and I felt sick. It could only be Clubfoot. It was. This chap we were talking to was from Warwick, and had never seen a Sambar deer before. He said the stag was just a bag of bones, probably wouldn't weigh 150 pounds. I didn't want to see the body, because that stag was best as a memory to me as the magnificent 600-pound monster that I had first met in the lupin while pheasant shooting. We estimated Clubfoot to be about 18 years old when his last trick failed.